4 stories caught my eye, not because they were unique, but because they seemed to imply human nature in the raw. The first story was about a woman who had nothing. Then she won the lotto. Because she had nothing to begin with, she knew about poverty, and she felt the needs of her other poor relatives. So, her first impulse was to share her fortune, and she did. As equitable as she could, she shared everything she won with all her less fortunate relatives. After all, they also had nothing to begin with. Soon the fortune was gone for her and for everyone. Everybody was back to where they started, but maybe feeling a little worse. The second story is the most common of the 3. A woman inherited a small fortune, and her first impulse was greed. It's mine, it's all mine. The less fortunate relatives were belittled in hopes that they would stay away, and they did. Intimidation was the order of the day. The poor relatives were kept at bay and reminded constantly that the fortune was hers, and hers alone. So much so that the poor relatives, with any degree of pride anyway, simply stayed away and wished her well. The third story was sad in that money became the purpose of life and living. A millionaire played with his fortune and turned his fortune into billions of dollars through manipulation, cheating, and by any means possible. People even died on his way to the top. Managing his fortune was his life's work, so much so that the simple things of life had no interest to him. His day, every day, was occupied with the constant monitoring of his fortune. Then one day it started. Governments changed, his stocks tumbled, and his massive fortune was disappearing in front of his eyes. His billions of dollars became $1 billion, and then that $1 billion became a few million dollars. It was just too much for him to bear, so he killed himself rather than risking a lifestyle that he was not accustomed to. Then there is the fourth story. A woman of very modest means, and she's a very happy woman. She shares all that she has without greed or rancor. She lives with her daughter and grandson, and she has vowed to never let greed stand in her way of happiness. Her daughter living with her is not a burden to her, but in fact is one of her many happiness. This fourth story represents a woman of modest means, and is probably the most common story of all. One that I personally admire, because I am a person of modest means who have been the victim of greed. I am also a man who has real friends, friends not bought with promises of trinkets and shelters, or any other thing. The beauty is this: when you have nothing to use to purchase friendships, then what is left is just you and your friends, a kinship based on sincerity, integrity, and honesty. But for me, there is something else. I have a camera, and with a camera, I'm able to capture some of the simple beauty of life and living. I am also very, very blessed. I take joy in seeing a beautiful world without greed in something as simple as a water droplet.